By March of 2020, the world as we knew it had changed. COVID-19 was spreading like wildfire, thousands of people were dying each week, and lockdown was just around the corner. That same month, Gretchen Anthony from Florida began texting her relatives, telling them she had COVID-19 and was being held by a CDC-approved task force. But this task force didn't exist, and Gretchen was nowhere to be found. A search of her home, however, revealed sinister evidence in the form of bloodstains and bleach. In March of 2015, Gretchen and David Anthony were married in Las Vegas, Nevada, after a whirlwind romance. Gretchen had grown up in the North, attending fashion school in New York City and earning a degree in New Jersey. In 2006, she moved to Florida, drawn to the warm weather and sandy beaches. Here, she worked as a teacher in Palm Beach County before securing a job in the Human Resources Department at a utility firm, a position she loved because it allowed her to connect with others. David Anthony, on the other hand, grew up with a single mother in Palm Beach Gardens. His childhood was described as distant and emotionally disconnected. People who knew him said he rarely spoke unless spoken to, and he had low self-esteem growing up. To gain confidence, David became obsessed with his physical fitness, working out constantly. After high school, he earned a scholarship to play basketball at Eckerd College. David eventually became a fitness coach at Orange Theory Fitness, where he met Gretchen. David was Gretchen's personal trainer, and on paper they seemed like a perfect match. However, at that time, Gretchen was still with her husband Jeff, with whom she shared a daughter, Eva. Despite this, Gretchen grew more attracted to David, eventually breaking up with Jeff and starting a new relationship with David. They soon married. For the first 2 years, their marriage seemed smooth. But by the end of the second year, cracks began to show. Gretchen confided in friends that David was becoming increasingly manic and verbally abusive. He exhibited unpredictable mood swings, and Gretchen wasn't sure how to handle them. She broke up with him for about 6 months before taking him back. Her friends warned her that David was bad news, becoming more unstable by the day. Gretchen knew David was struggling with his mental health. At times, she locked herself in the bathroom just to create space between them. She was so concerned about his behavior that she slept with a knife under her pillow. In December of 2019, Gretchen messaged a friend, "I wish him well and hope he learns how to deal with his mental issues. I feel bad that I couldn't help, but I think he needs to learn to love himself before he can love anyone, something he might not experience in his lifetime." Then, on Christmas Day of that year, Gretchen found her wedding ring, passport, driver's license, credit cards, and some money hidden in David's backpack. This terrified Gretchen. She had no idea what he was planning and confided in her friends that she was increasingly scared of her husband. Before the year ended, Gretchen made the decision to leave David for good. She asked him to move out of their shared home on Sunshine Drive in the Mallory Creek community of Abacoa, Florida. David moved in with his elderly mother, and Gretchen changed the locks. Gretchen had a 12-year-old daughter, Eva, from her previous marriage. Her friend and colleague, Jennifer Rogers, described her as an extremely positive and motivating person. Gretchen loved nothing more on earth than being a mother, and she viewed Eva as her greatest accomplishment. She and Jeff were co-parenting their daughter, and Gretchen was ready to move on from her relationship with David. While things were looking up for Gretchen, the same couldn't be said for David. At Orange Theory Fitness, where he worked, colleagues noticed a change. He started showing up late and became increasingly difficult to deal with. As his boss, Tabitha Hopkins, told the Miami New Times, "There's no in-between with him. You never know what David you're going to get." On January 26th, the world was moved to tears by the tragic death of Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. Kobe had been David's idol, and when he came to work, he couldn't stop crying and wailing. He even gave a speech in the lobby saying how upset he was. His manager asked if he wanted to go home, but he refused and essentially threw a tantrum. As Tabitha put it, "You would have thought he and Kobe Bryant were best friends." In February, David was fired from his job after he didn't show up to work one morning, leaving gym members waiting outside. Shortly after, both Gretchen and David signed a divorce petition in mid-January. Gretchen, now 51, and David, 43, were ready to move on. In the weeks leading up to the lockdown, David began rambling about Costa Rica. He dreamed of leaving Florida and setting up a new life there. He even invited friends, colleagues, and women he went on dates with to join him. One woman recounted to the Miami New Times how, during a date, David tried to inappropriately touch her. When she pushed him away, he jumped out of his seat, screamed in her face, and stormed off. Later, when she got home, she found that David had already moved some of his belongings into her house, including clothes and food in her freezer. She had to call security to get him to leave. A week later, David did the same thing at Gretchen's home. He stood outside, banging on the window, talking nonsense about Costa Rica. He told Gretchen that the world was going to end. David had found himself in deep trouble just a month after the divorce petition was submitted. On the 15th of March, 2020, he was arrested in the early morning hours after being reported for suspiciously approaching young girls near the beach on Singer Island. In addition to approaching the teenage girls, David was pacing back and forth, swearing profusely. The police arrived at the scene, parking their cruiser about 10 spaces away from David's pickup truck, which he had parked outside a restaurant. The officers observed David's actions as they approached. One of the officers ran David's license plates and discovered that David had tampered with the plate by using black electrical tape, changing a 6 to an 8. When questioned about the altered license plate, David suggested that his stepdaughter Eva probably did it. He said, "She's 12 and she likes to play with tape." The officers noticed that David was unusually nervous and kept repeating himself. He ripped the tape off the plate and quickly walked to the driver's side of the pickup truck, asking if he was being detained. As David reached for the floorboard under the driver's seat, one of the officers drew his weapon and aimed it at him. David claimed he was reaching for his driver's license, but instead he climbed out of the car with his hands up and sat on the ground. As the second officer tried to handcuff him, David suddenly jumped back into his car and repeatedly slammed the door on the officer's arm. By this point, a third police officer had arrived, and they managed to arrest David. He was charged with violently resisting arrest. It turned out that the object under the car seat that David had been trying to reach for was a Bowie knife. On the 18th of March, David posted a $3,000 surety bond and was released from the Palm Beach County Jail. As part of his release terms, David was not allowed to leave the county. Just a couple of days later, Gretchen's family began receiving alarming text messages from her. She informed them that she had tested positive for COVID-19 and was at Jupiter Medical Center, being held by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. The following day, Gretchen continued sending texts, stating that she had an acute case of COVID-19 and was being transported from Jupiter Medical Center to a CDC-approved task force in Belle Glade. She mentioned that she was sedated upon arrival. Gretchen's family found the text messages peculiar. The tone didn't match her usual way of speaking, and some suggested that the language sounded more like David than Gretchen. Concerned, the family contacted all local hospitals, but none had any record of Gretchen ever being there. Jupiter Medical Center confirmed that the situation Gretchen described was not in line with their protocol, and that she had never been a patient at their facility. The family's concern for Gretchen's well-being intensified, especially since she and David were going through a separation. One family member commented that David had issues, and they feared he could have done something to Gretchen. Her colleagues also grew worried when they hadn't heard from her. She had come to work on the 20th of March, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She was in good spirits and showed no signs of illness. However, on the following Monday, Gretchen didn't show up for work. She didn't call in to report being sick, and she hadn't informed anyone about taking time off. Her boss, Don Paris, who was also a close friend, texted her, "Gretchen, are you okay?" As the hours passed with no reply, he texted her again, "Hi, please let me know if you need something. I'm really worried about you." Later that afternoon, Don received an email from Gretchen's work email address. The wording was unusual and didn't sound like something she would write. The email explained that she had developed a low-grade fever over the weekend, woken up with shortness of breath, and was going to the hospital to be tested for COVID-19. Jennifer Rogers, a friend and colleague, later told Good Morning America that the language in the email was alarming. It didn't sound like Gretchen at all. It was very strange. That same day, Don finally received a text message from Gretchen. "Tested positive for coronavirus early this morning. That's the bad news. But I'm at a CDC coronavirus treatment facility that only handles COVID cases. The good news is that my blood type has the potential to be used in the cure. Not sure if you remember me saying that I have a strain of mad cow disease in my blood, but that strain is significant in gathering more answers to find a cure. For safety purposes, Dr. Sinclair and her team are strongly recommending that we maintain contact with immediate family members only. I'm using my mom. The family went to Gretchen's home, but she wasn't there. A friend then contacted David and explained the situation. He replied, "All we know is that she's saying she's at a CDC facility because she has the virus, but something doesn't seem right." David claimed that he had last seen Gretchen on the morning of the 21st of March, stating that he randomly bumped into her that morning. He said that Gretchen told him she was going to the beach to ground herself because she wasn't feeling well. According to David, she also advised him to plead insanity for his earlier arrest, which he referred to as bogus police charges. David's story didn't match the text messages coming from Gretchen's phone. The family went to the police and reported her missing. They shared the alarming text messages with the authorities. Fear spread among Gretchen's loved ones when they were informed that no CDC-approved task force in Belle Glade existed. While Gretchen remained missing, the text messages continued. On the day police began investigating her disappearance, a message from Gretchen's phone said she was being placed on a ventilator at Palms West Hospital. She also mentioned a doctor, but when the hospital was contacted, the staff confirmed that Gretchen was not a patient there and had never been. Gretchen's boss checked with her health insurance provider, who confirmed that no claims had been made on her policy. Police went to Gretchen's home on Sunshine Drive in the Mallory Creek community of Abacoa, Florida. The house was empty. While the police were outside, a neighbor approached them and asked if they were investigating the attack that occurred on the morning of the 21st of March. The police, unaware of any such incident, asked for details. The neighbor recounted hearing a woman's blood-curdling scream coming from Gretchen's home, followed by a woman shouting, "No, no, it hurts!" This occurred around 6 a.m. The neighbor went outside to investigate, but by the time she reached the alley, the screaming had stopped. Another neighbor confirmed hearing the same disturbing sounds. Other neighbors reported that on the same morning, they had seen David Anthony's black pickup truck outside Gretchen's home. They noticed the bed of the truck was down, with a large tarp covering some unknown item. Surveillance footage from some neighbors' homes confirmed that it was indeed David and his pickup truck, capturing him coming and going from Gretchen's house that morning. In the days following the screams, Gretchen's text messages to friends and family continued. According to another neighbor who spoke to police, he had seen water and what appeared to be some kind of white chemical draining into the street from Gretchen's closed garage. He also noticed David washing Gretchen's car in the driveway. With this disturbing testimony, police broke into Gretchen's home. Inside, they found 2 bottles of cleaner and a rag in the kitchen. In the washing machine, they discovered towels with some kind of red substance on them, which they believed was blood. There was broken glass from a picture frame at the top of the stairs and small drops of blood in the master bedroom. Next, they checked the garage. The key had been snapped off in the locked door, so they kicked it down. Inside, they found large wet bleach stains on the floor alongside what appeared to be blood. Cadaver dogs were brought into the home, and they alerted in several areas, including around the bleach stain in the garage. The garage smelled strongly of chemicals. Thankfully for the investigation, there were security cameras at Gretchen's home. When police reviewed the footage, it revealed a very disturbing scenario. At around 6 a.m., David could be seen standing in Gretchen's screened-in porch, carrying an unknown object. He appeared to be lying in wait. About 10 minutes later, Gretchen was seen opening the garage door and could be heard asking, "What are you doing?" This was followed by a muffled shout. David then forced Gretchen into the garage, off camera. From the security camera inside the garage, Gretchen could be heard screaming, followed by her shouting, "Alexa, turn on the garage light!" The audio picked up a loud thud and Gretchen's muffled cries. She then shouted, "Alexa, call 911. Tragically, however, Gretchen hadn't set up Alexa to respond to that command. Her voice became more faint as she asked Alexa once more to call 911. Later, the garage camera captured an image of a woman on the ground, not moving. She had light-colored hair, stained red by blood. Next to her, a 5-gallon water jug smeared with blood was visible. Moments later, David could be seen walking into the background of the garage. He reached up to the security camera and turned it off. It was now abundantly clear that Gretchen's home was an active crime scene. But Gretchen herself was nowhere to be found. Neither was her dark blue Mini Cooper. Later that same day, police found Gretchen's car in the parking lot of Jupiter Medical Center. Inside, they found her purse, and on the steering wheel and gear shift there were smeared bloodstains. Luckily, the medical center had surveillance cameras, and police requested to review the footage. The surveillance video showed that 2 days prior, the car had entered the parking lot. It then showed a tall white man with dark hair exit the car, lock it, and leave the area on foot. Notably, David Anthony was a tall white man with dark hair, standing at 6 feet 7 inches tall. One of the police's first points of investigation was to get in contact with David. However, when they tried to reach him, they received no response. They went to his last listed residence, but he wasn't there. His mother was. David's mother informed police that she hadn't heard from her son since March 24th. She said he had taken his dog and told her he was moving to Costa Rica. Police informed David's mother that Gretchen was missing. She revealed that she, too, had received strange text messages from Gretchen, asking if she could look after her cats while she was in quarantine for 2 weeks due to COVID-19. The text messages to Gretchen's family and friends eventually stopped. Police were able to trace Gretchen's phone to Pensacola, about 600 miles away from where she lived. By this point, police were looking for both Gretchen and David, focusing their search on Pensacola. They determined that David and his vehicle were captured on CCTV footage as he attempted to sell a bag of women's jewelry at a store. A local man told them that David had sold him jewelry, claiming it belonged to his mother, who had died of COVID-19. One item of jewelry was a distinctive David Yurman ring, something Gretchen owned. Suspicions were mounting. From the alarming text messages to the blood-chilling screams, David selling jewelry and vanishing himself, things were looking quite ominous. Police issued a search and capture order for David, while continuing to trace both Gretchen's and David's phones. The day after Gretchen's car was found, police were able to ping both phones to Texas. On March 30th, police finally made contact with David over the phone. He informed them that Gretchen was in the hospital receiving treatment for COVID-19. However, police knew this was false. He then told them that he was actually with Gretchen and that she was completely fine. However, he claimed that she did not want to speak with them. He also claimed that Gretchen had given him a written statement which he read over the phone. According to David, Gretchen had recently uncovered some illegal tax fraud at her place of employment and had contacted the IRS about it. He said she was terrified for her life, believing that someone had been sent to her home to hurt her over the weekend. Once again, police knew this wasn't true. They had contacted local agencies and confirmed that Gretchen had made no such report, and the allegations against her employers were completely fictional. David also claimed that Gretchen was hiding from her former husband, Jeff, alleging that Jeff had forced his children to send threatening texts and voicemails to both Gretchen and himself. David clearly had no clue about all the evidence that had been recovered by this point, evidence that placed him at her house over the weekend, that neighbors had heard her screaming, and that he had been captured on surveillance footage in the garage, alongside what appeared to be Gretchen's body on the floor, with blood staining her hair. Finally, on March 31st, David was tracked down in Las Cruces, New Mexico, nearly 1,900 miles west of Gretchen's home. He was walking his dog when he was surrounded by police officers and taken into custody without incident. David was brought in for questioning. Officers confronted him with the evidence. David claimed that he and Gretchen had been traveling together, but had split up somewhere near El Paso, Texas. He maintained that Gretchen was alive and well. However, by now the police knew that this was tragically untrue. David was charged with the kidnapping and murder of Gretchen Anthony. He was transported back to Florida, and during a press conference, police confirmed that although they hadn't recovered Gretchen's body, they had gathered enough evidence to deduce that she was dead and that David was responsible. In addition to the gruesome evidence found inside Gretchen's home, a cadaver dog had alerted to the scent of human decomposition in David's pickup truck. Police also found 2 Amazon Echo devices and dismounted security cameras in the truck, which he had stolen from Gretchen's home. The public was asked to come forward with any information related to Gretchen's murder. Weeks passed with no sign of Gretchen. In mid-May, David was extradited from New Mexico to Florida. He waived his extradition, but COVID-19 travel restrictions delayed the process. He also requested reasonable accommodations during the long journey, citing previous shoulder and knee injuries. Upon arrival at the Palm Beach County Jail, David was held without bond. As the case progressed through the justice system, the search for Gretchen's body continued. Then, on December 20th, 2020, just days before Christmas, it was announced that a plea agreement had been reached. David pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder and kidnapping. In exchange for this plea, he provided information about the location of Gretchen's body. The agreement also stipulated that prosecutors could not pursue additional charges based on what was found during the recovery of Gretchen's remains. David directed police to a site near Bush Road and Indiantown Road, just 3 miles from where Gretchen had lived. Her body was discovered wrapped in a blanket and buried in woodland on the grounds of an assisted living facility. She had been stabbed multiple times in the neck and torso. The discovery of Gretchen's body brought bittersweet closure for her loved ones, who had struggled with her disappearance for 8 long months. Gretchen's daughter, in particular, had been devastated. Without David's cooperation, the first-degree murder charge would have likely continued in court. David Anthony was handed a sentence of 38 years in prison. He was told that he would need to serve at least 85% of that sentence before being considered for parole. It was quite a meager sentence given what David had done, but Gretchen's family had been so desperate to get her body back so that they could give her a proper burial. If David had proceeded to trial and been convicted, there was every likelihood that he would have received a death sentence.